Okay, I think we can get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Becca Shumlin. I am a director here at Putney Student Travel. Thank you all for joining us today for this very special Oxford Academia Meet the Faculty webinar. I'm joined today by one of Putney's co-directors, Peter Shumlin, who also happens to be my dad. And we're also joined by Professor James Basker, who is our incredible partner on these Oxford Academia programs. And then we're also very excited today to have with us Rodina and Mihaela, who are two of our incredible instructors on the Oxford Academia program. So today we will start with Pete, who will tell you a little bit about Putney's history and our history with Jim and the Oxford Academia program. And then we'll turn it over to Jim, who will go a little bit more in depth into the Oxford program. And then he will lead a discussion with our two wonderful faculty members to hear from them about the program. And then throughout the presentation, we encourage you to use the Q&A chat function that should be at the bottom of your screen. You can put your questions into there, type them in, and we will have people answering your questions as we go. And then we'll also save some of them for the very end to answer some questions live. And just so you know, we are recording this and you will receive a recording of this webinar probably tomorrow via email. I think that is it. And I will turn it over to Pete.
Thank you, Becca. And I'm delighted to be here with all of you. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to keep it brief because we really want you to hear from Professor Basker and the amazing faculty that we have with us today, who are an example of the extraordinary faculty at Oxford Academia. That picture on the left is my mom and dad, Becca's grandparents. They founded Putney in this barn that Becca and I are at, an old converted cow barn in Vermont, 72 summers ago. And their vision was to turn summertime, which at the time was sort of a long break. They were teachers and educators. They thought it was sort of a long waste of time for students, and turn it into education, which is really what their dream was. And we've been doing that ever since. You have to remember, back then, for their programs at Oxford and Cambridge and other places, it was before commercial aircraft. They used to go by ship. You'd drop your student at the port of New York sometime in around June 20 and wouldn't see them until the end of August. There was no iPhones, no communications except for good old Western Union telegraph. So it was quite an adventurous thing for them to be doing that. Today, Putney's directed by the second and third generation of Shumlins. And you can see the fourth generation is coming along there, Max, and we expect him to be behind the desk shortly. I want to tell you a little bit about our history with Oxford and Cambridge and why I'm so honored to be here to introduce Professor Basker and his team, who will take it from there. Our parents had amazing programs at Oxford and Cambridge back in the years. Then about 40 years ago, Professor Basker founded his own program, which at that time was called Oxbridge Summer Programs. And he did so really with much of the same spirit that my parents had, which, except that he really wanted students from all over the world, high school students, to have the kind of educational experience that he's had. Now, Jim might correct this introduction a little bit, but I'll give you the summary from my perspective. Jim got his BA at Harvard, a university that I've done some teaching at in recent years, that you may have heard of. And then he was a Rhodes Scholar. He first got his master's at Cambridge, and he was a Rhodes Scholar at Christ Church at Oxford. He got his PhD there. He taught there for several years. He then taught at Harvard. For the last 30 plus years, he's been the Gilman-Lehrman professor at both Barnard, and he teaches at Columbia University. He's the president of the Gilman-Lehrman American History Institute, which has educates over 28,000 teachers around the globe in history. And he's also on the American Rhodes Scholar Board, in gratitude for his Rhodes Scholarship, which really, I think, helped to create the extraordinary educator that he is. I have a lot of contact with educators from all over the world, and obviously have met a lot of Harvard colleagues who are incredibly bright, great professors. I've got to say, without any hesitation, that Jim is the most charismatic, engaging history educator that I've ever spoken with. And our students love that experience and connection with him. He founded his own program. It was so good, to be honest, that after 5 or 7 years of his running that program, we started telling students, go there, and we stopped running our general program there. Why was Jim's program so superior to what Putney and I think so many other organizations could do? It's really, I think, number one, because his passion is Oxford. And two, he has a connection, as you're going to see from two examples today, through his involvement with Rose House, with Oxford, with mentoring people through their PhDs, to young faculty that he would invite after they finished their PhDs to come teach at his program, and they would come back year after year after year. So to be candid, he got a level of teaching faculty that the rest of us simply could not get. And he still does that to this day. I won't go into too much of the detail, except to say that I think you should know that Jim is no longer associated with the program that he founded. I've often joked that that's a little bit like taking Macbeth out of Macbeth, like who's left on the stage. And we joined up a couple of years ago to recreate Jim's dream of really creating an educational experience at Oxford and Paris and Siena that no one else can match. So we're really honored to be partnering with Professor Basker. He's obviously at Oxford during the summer making the magic happen. And without him, we would not be able to offer this absolutely extraordinary, unparalleled educational experience that he's about to speak about. Before we focus, and we're going to focus mostly on Oxford today, I just want to point out that we obviously also have these programs at the American University of Paris, as well as at the University of Siena. The brief stories, I can just focus on those for a minute. All of these programs, Oxford Academia, mostly in the month of July, are 2-week sessions. So in 2-week sessions, every student does a major, which meets 6 days a week, including Saturday morning, and a minor, which meets 3 afternoons a week. And in each 2-week session, you're really able to dig into 2 topics in ways that you just can't do in a high school. Having said that, these programs are mixed and matchable. In other words, one could do 2 weeks at Oxford and 2 weeks at American University of Paris, or 2 weeks at University of Siena and 2 weeks at Oxford. So you are able to mix and match them, and we coordinate the transportation for students so you're not sort of floating out on your own as you move from various programs. I should point out that when you double up on programs, you get Oxford, Paris, Oxford, Siena, you get a $1,000 discount. If you stay at Oxford for the entire month, which is what we prefer, you get a $2,400 discount because we really want students to be there for a month to really fully get the whole experience. So that, I just wanted to say a word about American University of Paris and Oxford. The American University of Paris is an extraordinary university. The current president actually taught for Jim, was one of the people that he mentored through whatever, and was a part of his program at Oxford for years. When she became president of the American University of Paris, she said, I want you here. They have an extraordinary residential arrangement, which they own on the Champs-Élysées. Their classrooms are in the 7th arrondissement. Imagine sitting between the Eiffel Tower and the Musée d'Orsay, overlooking the Seine and the Eiffel Tower as you go to these extraordinary facilities of theirs. And we are the only program for high school students at the American University of Paris during the summertime. University of Siena, there's always a story behind every Putney program. The current leadership of the American University of Paris is the reason we're there. University of Siena, we're there because in another part of my life, I had the pleasure of serving 3 terms as governor of the state of Vermont, did a lot of work around education and climate change and energy. And I joined President Obama when they put the Paris Climate Accord together. For various reasons that I won't bore you with, they assigned me to Italy, and I worked closely and became good friends with the current chancellor of the University of Siena, founded in 1240, who said, don't you do education when you're not doing this political stuff? And I said, yeah. And he said, we want you here. So we are the only group of Americans, of high school age students, our students come from all over the world, at the University of Siena in the summertime, and it's an extraordinary experience as well. So we can tell you more about them. Feel free to call us, but I want to turn it over to someone that I have an extraordinary admiration for. Someone who I think is the most exciting educator that students can deal with in the summertime anywhere. Professor James Basker. Jim, thanks so much.
Peter, thank you. And I'm really glad to be in front of interested families and students today, and especially pleased to have my old friends and cherished colleagues, Rodina and Mihaela, here. I'm going to tell you more about them, and you'll hear from them in a minute. I'll just say that in order to conceal the messy room that I'm talking to you from, I have this slide up behind me that puts me in my old college in Oxford. That's Peckwater Quadrangle in Christchurch. And it's typical of the architecture you'll find all over Oxford. There are 38 residential colleges. That building is 315 years old. It was built in about 1704, and is one of the sites that our students will see. But if we look at the main slides on this show, I just want to give you a sense of Oxford, which is this magical place that I've been bringing students to for decades, and I never get tired of it. On the left is a view of another part of Christchurch, the main quadrangle at the front, with Tom Tower over the gate. And through the gate, you can see Pembroke College across the street. The right-hand half of that slide is the exterior of the Sheldonian Theatre, which was built in the 1660s. So by Oxford standards, it's a relatively modern building. It's the place where all the official ceremonies happen. From matriculation, when students register at the beginning of their careers, to graduation, when they are there for degree ceremonies. When I have the students in Oxford, I explain to them the origins of this building, which really came about because of the misbehavior of Oxford students in the prior place that they used to hold graduations. But we'll save that for a future conversation. If we move on to some other scenes of Oxford in the next slide, this is a magic view. The Sheldonian from the side, you can see it's shaped like a Roman amphitheater. This was the first masterpiece by Christopher Wren, who at that point was an Oxford don in mathematics and engineering. He got the commission to build that building using a Roman model. He used his engineering genius to create it without any columns in the interior, even though it's got a very broad, flat ceiling across the interior. And it's one of the most beautiful and unique buildings in the world. As it happened, a year or two after he built that building, the Great Fire of London destroyed something like a third of all the buildings in London, and he became the architect of choice for I think something like 100 churches and residences as they were rebuilt in London. And he became famous not as an Oxford academic, but as one of the most famous architects in history. Mihaela could probably tell us more about him because that's her expertise. The bridge that we're looking under, some of you will sense an echo of the Bridge of Sighs in Florence, and that's, I mean, in Venice, and that's absolutely right. Although this Bridge of Sighs was built in 1910 to connect two parts of Hertford College. Under the bridge, we can also see just on the right, the Clarendon building, also from the early 1700s. It used to be the home of the Oxford University Press until it was outgrown. It now is administrative offices. And in the lower floor, right-hand side, is actually the Vice Chancellor's office of Louise Richardson, who is the first woman Vice Chancellor of Oxford in its 800-year history. So there's a lot going on in that particular image. To the left is an edge of the Bodleian Library instead of the Sheldonian in front of us. But we'll go on to some more scenes of colleges. It'll give you a sense of the residential life. This is an aerial view on a cloudy day of University College. It gives you a sense of what the internal courtyard, or what they call in Oxford a quadrangle or a quad, looks like. You see those twin doors under the central tower. To the left is the chapel, and to the right is the dining hall inside. This is University College, one of the two colleges we'll be living in the summer. The other is Worcester College, which is, if anything, even more beautiful in its interior. University College has the wonderful distinction of claiming to be the oldest college, one of three that claims that. It was founded in 1264 and takes great pride in its ancient pedigree. If we go to the next slide, We'll see another image or two images of University College. The one on the left, obviously on a spring day when the flowers are out. And on the right is a room within University College that commemorates one of its most famous students, although he was only a student at University College for a brief time. That is a monument to Percy Bysshe Shelley, the great Romantic poet, who was also something of a rebel. He was at University College for one term, insisted on publishing a pamphlet that scandalized the university officials, and they expelled him forever. He went off to a career as a great radical and writer and poet, and eventually wound up in Italy, where he died young in his early 30s in a sailing accident in the sea. His body washed up. And so this monument has that beautiful alabaster statue of his body as if it were just on the beach in Italy. And around the top are lines from a poem that he actually wrote in memory of his dear friend, John Keats, who had died at age 24 a few years earlier. So this is one of the special places in University College, but each of the 38 colleges in Oxford has its own special places. And I'm sure Rodina and Mihaela will share some of their favorites when we open up for a broader discussion. If we go to the next slide, I don't want to say that Oxford is only ancient architecture. Oxford goes back to the Norman conquest, basically. The Oxford Castle was built in 1071, and it's still a place that people can visit. In fact, our students will visit remnants of the castle, including the dungeon and some of the spookier parts of it. But this is one of the most modern and beautiful buildings in Oxford today. This is the Blavadnik School of Government, funded by the Blavadnik family, who are one of the wealthiest families in the world today, and obviously created a gorgeous space for the School of Government, which is one of the most international of the faculties in Oxford. Scholars come from all over the world, and as they do for every subject, but particularly in government. And it's on the new site of a huge development. Here is one of our teachers, and this gives you now a sense of the curriculum in our program. On the left is one of our history teachers, Max Lau, who did his DPhil at Oxford and alternates between Oxford and Tokyo with his teaching. Here, I think he's showing some kids medieval armor. Max is actually a specialist in the Middle Ages. But this slide gives you a chance to see some of the intellectual variety of the courses on offer. And I want to emphasize that each of these seminars can be taken either as a major, which would be 3 hours each day for 2 weeks, or as a minor, which would be 3 afternoons a week for a couple of hours, plus, some exploration time, field trips, out of class learning opportunities. You'll also see in these courses that while some of them may seem what you recognize, like English literature, most of them are classes that students cannot typically do in their schools at home. And each of them has an organizing principle, that is to create experiential learning for the students, to put in front of them the most brilliant faculty they can find who have a passion for their subject and can model that passion in imaginative ways. Having said that, I want to turn now to Rodina and Mihaela, maybe starting with you, Rodina, and ask you to tell people a little about yourself. You're actually sitting in a very interesting place right now. And then a little about the course you teach.
Sure thing. Thank you so much, Professor Basker. Good evening, everyone that's joining us. And hello from London. That's where I'm talking to you from. My background is unfortunately not quite as glamorous as Vermont or the quad behind Professor Basker. I join you from my hospital. So my name is Dr. Rodina Peachey, and I am an adult intensive care physician and anesthesiologist here in the UK. It is a dual specialty. I remember very fondly my 4 years of living and studying in Oxford University. I was at Lady Margaret Hall College doing my pre-med degree in biochemistry, and this led me on to doing some wonderful research in the field of developmental biology, specifically looking at how the musculoskeletal system develops. And that took me to the wonderful place of Vienna, where I did some of my research out there. And then it was time to focus on my medical studies, and anesthesiology was clearly the specialty for me right from about halfway through my medical school. And I was very fortunate enough to win a coveted place on one of the best internship programs and residency programs in Northwest London. And this is what you find me in at the moment. Our training here is much longer than it is over in the United States. So I'm well into my residency training now, and have actually just finished a year with the intensive care and critical care of newborns. So tiny neonatal patients in their incubators, helping them to grow and survive as best as possible. And I've now made my return back over to the land of adult intensive care for the remainder of this year. I've done lots of teaching along the way. I've been involved in Professor Basker's programs since 2008. I have had the joy of teaching with the Putney program for the last 2 years, and it is always a wonderful experience. I teach lots of students through the year in my medical practice, and at the universities that my hospitals are associated with. And it is a real joy to come and teach for these programs and the students that come on the summer program, because I get to bring all of this frontline medical practice into the classroom and share it with some of the brightest, smartest, and most enthusiastic students that I have come across. It's always so enjoyable. There is no way I can possibly teach medicine in 2 weeks, although I would love to be able to do that. So simply, my role, as I see it, is to share my passion for my subject, the wonderful world of medicine, and the breadth of it with those of you who come and take my class. And it's about cultivating thought and interest and curiosity. So how do we do that? We do that by me throwing as many different aspects of this world of medicine at you as possible. So we look at different specialties: emergency medicine, orthopedics, surgery, family medicine, pediatrics, psychiatry, and we do it in different locations. So I took my class to have a debate about life, death, and everything in between in the chapel at our college in Worcester this summer. I took us to the site where the founding father of neuroanatomy discovered the blood supply to the brain, and drew his pictures of that with Christopher Wren, who we were hearing about, who designed the Sheldonian Theatre in Oxford that you saw earlier today. We went to the very spot where those two people worked together to discover that. And what did we do there? We came up with our own way to try to test the function of the main nerves in your brain, and learn about the blood supply to those exact nerves. We do surface anatomy drawing on our colleagues, friends, and staff. We do our final project, which is a ward round, when every student gets a specific disease to look into in depth, and then you get to present what you have found out about that in our real life ward that we set up in a space in the college at the end of our two week program. It is a wonderful experience. It's such a joy to teach it. I always get asked the most interesting, fascinating questions every year I come back, and I really hope you strongly consider coming to take not only this program, but coming to take the medicine class as well.
Mihaela, you have a wonderfully international background too. I hope you'll tell about it before you go into your class.
Oh, yes, that is true. I was born in Serbia. But I lived kind of across the world. I lived from Jerusalem to Vienna, so pretty much everywhere. But then I did something weird, and I also started studying everywhere. So that was, and everything, I have to say. So I started studying engineering, so architectural engineering. This was my first degree. But I was also really interested in the brain. Actually, what really interested me, and this was true, I really expected more psychology in my architectural degree, I always wondered, how come some buildings are so beautiful that they make us cry? How come even if an atheist walks into a church in Rome, they feel something, they can't really explain it? And then I started thinking it has to be, as a scientist and engineer. I wasn't a scientist yet back then, but anyways, I was wondering, how come that this feeling is, can it be studied? I mean, it's neurophysiological. You cannot control it. It's basically pupil dilation. It's kind of goosebumps. It's heart beating. It's basically everything that makes you excited. And then I started to think I really need to study neuroscience. This is where I went to Vienna, and I started studying cognitive science. I studied at the Medical University of Vienna and University of Vienna. I even started studying artificial intelligence. And when I finished that program, I'm just really excited to share this because it's so unusual. I studied neuroscience in London, King's College London. It was after all of that engineering and science, I started thinking, yes, but you know, there must be something else, a human soul, something that I can't really express through, you know, through mathematics and through the scientific research that I was doing. And I went on to philosophy. So I studied at Magdalen College, Oxford. I actually studied aesthetics. So I was just trying to bring it all together. I promise it makes sense in the end. Namely, what I'm trying to do right now at Cambridge, of all places, is to bring it together into a new discipline called neuroformology, which is a discipline that studies how architectural spaces affect our mind and affect our behavior and just affect our emotions. Basically, how we are connected to our environment. And it's not unusual. I just have to say that there are already new disciplines out there. For example, neuroaesthetics actually studies how artwork affects our brains. So it is not an unusual thing. I'm just saying, so just so you know. When it comes to the course, I completely agree with Rodina. There is no way that you can convey what a topic is, what a discipline is in 2 weeks. But you can offer a glimpse into it and you can get people excited about it. And this is why in my course, which I named Oxford School of Architecture, because famously, Oxford does not have an architectural department. In all of its 800-year history, it just not deemed relevant, for architecture to actually be relevant enough to have a department. And this is something that Jim knows that I will be trying to change in the future. So I actually have a lined up talk with some of people who work with the Vice Chancellor. I did not share this with Jim, but it's pretty exciting. And the teacher that you just saw on the slide, the history teacher, just showing his students something, he's helping me do it. So this is what happens when you know Jim, and when you are on one of his programs, people get together, people start talking, amazing things happen, new disciplines are being made up, and apparently new departments. We'll see in the future. Now, just a really brief thing about the course. The course in architecture, design, and sustainability is highly interdisciplinary. And when I say highly interdisciplinary, I really mean it, because Oxford University is such a magical place that it has a department for physics and philosophy. So it's a department where actual quantum physics researchers work along with phenomenologists, with experimental philosophers. And it's an extremely potent connection between art and sciences, humanities and sciences. So this is why in my course, we are doing everything from practice, what in architecture we call studio. So we're actually making models. We're also doing drawings, perspective drawings and sketches, conceptual drawings. We're also doing theory and debates. So it's a combination of many things. And in the end, it's experiential. And it also utilizes Oxford as a backdrop. Now, for Oxford, I have to say one thing, and I'm sure that Jim and Rodina will agree. Oxford is a really weird place. It's almost suspended. It's beyond reality, but it's also at the same time somehow more real than reality. And I can't really explain it without saying that you are somehow the best version of yourself when you're in Oxford. It is an extremely enabling environment. And you should believe me, because I study enabling environments from the neuroscientific side and architectural side. And Oxford is a perfect example. So I'm really hoping that you will choose this, and I'm hoping that you will choose it for the whole month to actually be immersed in this enabling environment. And I'm just hoping that you are going to love it as we are loving it. Thank you.
Mihaela and Rodina, both of you, of course, are fantastic. I want to take a moment to talk about some of their colleagues. Obviously, you're hearing from two of the most brilliant and most passionate and interesting teachers, but we have so many others. And on that featured faculty slide, I'll just say a word about each of them because these people are masters of their fields and they're brilliant teachers. Max Lau, I mentioned, his field is medieval history. He teaches in Oxford and in Asia. Yan Chen is one of the first Rhodes Scholars from China. Imagine being one of the most brilliant people in a country of more than 1 billion who's come to Oxford and worked in anthropology and taught a course for us last summer and was hugely popular. Walker Mims is an American writer who did a degree at Oxford as a graduate. He also does some teaching for us and helps in the residential life. In the lower left is Victoria Taylor, an English woman who worked in the civil service after graduating from Oxford, decided she wanted to be back in the academic world. She's a specialist in criminology and justice and doing an advanced degree, brings her practical experience to the classroom. Ayushi is from India, one of the most brilliant young legal scholars of her generation. She has multiple law degrees. She works in an advanced area of connecting ethics and law, international law, around enhancements to the human body. And she actually teaches law for Queen's College, Oxford. Gonzalo is from Chile. He's a lawyer in Chile. He's an international specialist who's doing postdoctoral work in Oxford, and a charming guy. Nicholas Salmon is an Australian Rhodes Scholar who's doing a DPhil in engineering, but he's a specialist in climate and does water engineering projects that are going to help us secure water supplies in the future. And in the right, Predrag, one of our oldest friends, he's a professor of medicine at the St. Andrews Medical School in Scotland. He's been in the faculty there for 20 years, but he comes to Oxford every summer to do some teaching in medicine. All of these people are passionate about what they do. They're almost as charming as Rodina and Mihaela, I promise you. And I'd love to go on and show people a little bit about the daily life in Oxford. I think we have an explanation of that on one of the other slides. Just if we go back one, here is an opportunity to see what life is like, both with the idyllic scene, of course, in the summer, in the quadrangle where students are free to hang out, to work on their reading or chat with friends or have a coffee or just meditate. The daily schedule is roughly what you see there, major classes after breakfast, stretching up till noon. As both Mihaela and Rodina made clear, Oxford itself is the larger classroom for all the classes, and teachers take their kids to many different sites in Oxford that enhance their learning experience. There's a couple of hours of break at lunchtime. People are free to go for lunch wherever they might like in the medieval center, sandwich shop, a picnic, any number of options. Then in the afternoon, 3 days a week, minor seminars. And I want to emphasize that students can take any other subject as a minor to complement their major. So there's no pigeonholing. Students could take English literature as a major and medicine as a minor, or they could take architecture and sustainability as a major and engineering as a minor. Any two in combination, set your own curriculum. We also have activities, walking tours, visits to museums, guest speakers, sports, all kinds of activities in the afternoon before dinner. Dinner is in the college in the evening, and then after dinner, again, many options of going to plays, hearing guest speakers, sometimes going to concerts, classical music concerts, which is a great way to see the interior of some of the medieval college chapels and other historic sites. And then by 10 o'clock, everyone's back in the college where there's check-in. I should say there is a residential staff, some of them teachers, others the deans and res life staff who make sure everyone in the college is safe and in good health. who takes care of them when they have problems or issues. And it's a very communal life that we have, where kids in different majors share their thoughts and their ideas. People get to go to different activities regardless of their majors and minors. I'd love for Rodina and Mihaela to just quickly say, outside your subject, what is your favorite place to take kids to show them in Oxford? Rodina?
So I'm torn between my love of architecture and my love of ice cream. I gotta say, so there is a fantastic ice cream shop. It's just outside Christchurch College. This is always a winner with the students every year. I'm always the first person to volunteer to take the group to take the group there each week or most days. But quite honestly, my favorite little spot in Oxford is a point where Merton College, Corpus Christi College, and Oriel College convene on a little corner. And if you catch that point just as the sun is going down, you look up to the tower of Merton College Chapel, and you can, if you're lucky, see the bats flying around the top of the bell tower there, and it just makes me it just reminds me of the most wonderful place that I'm standing in. Exactly as Mihaela said, it is the most enabling, beautiful environment in which to come and be part of, especially during the summer, and learn in. And that's what really brings that down to earth for me.
How about you, Mihaela?
Yes. So yes, I'm also torn, but those are my two places are a bit different. One is a graveyard. So it's St. Giles Graveyard, and I love it because for some people who are not who do not live in the UK, they sometimes think that it's weird that people hang out at graveyards here. So they take their lunch breaks here, but those are just beautiful places. They're basically parks. So we go to a graveyard, we talk about mortality, but also design of memorials and things like that. And it's always a profound experience, I have to say. Although some people have reservations when I tell them what we're going to do. The other one is a really cool cafe near the Ratcliffe Camera. Now, the Ratcliffe Camera is the one that is it's the postcard Oxford building. That's the one. It's the circular building that everyone knows from Oxford, and the most typical one. You know what's really weird about it? That you can't really draw it in a really nice way because there are no, I mean, it's a circular building. So if it was anything else, you could actually kind of maybe play with the perspective a bit, and the final result would look wonderful. But since it's circular, it's a bit tricky to do. So this is what we do. We just sit at the cafe, we order some food, we order some coffee, and we draw. And we also bring watercolor. And I have to tell you, I've never seen students so proud than when tourists come along to ask, oh, did you do this? And they're just floored because maybe like 4 days ago, they didn't know how to do perspective drawing. They didn't know how to drawing at all. They thought like, oh, I'm just here because I like engineering, but I wasn't sure. But it's not about the art. It's about everything, like I already said. So architecture, especially my course, it's not just about drawing. It's about theory. It's about everything. So yes, and I'm going on to something else. So yes, but those were my two places.
I love that.
Yeah.
I want to just say that I'll just say quickly, because we could go on in this vein for a long time, but I've been showing students around Oxford for more than 35 years. And so there's a feeling, and Mihaela kind of evoked this briefly earlier, that almost every building, every street, every corner, every brick in Oxford speaks to you. Speaks to you with some history, speaks to you with some aesthetic impact. It speaks to you with some evocative aura. And I love taking students around, especially in the early evening of summer, to show them some of the sites, whether they are historic from the time of the English Civil War, when Oxford was made King Charles's headquarters for 3 years, and they were surrounded by parliamentary army forces, or more modern sites like Rhodes House, which was the place where Albert Einstein came and lectured in 1931 as effectively in the 1930s a refugee from Germany, and made such an impact that 500 people came to hear him lecture in German, despite the fact that most of the people in the audience couldn't understand him. But Oxford has always been at the crossroads of the world in terms of its history, in terms of the scholars who come there to learn from each other and to develop their own ideas. And that's really what we're hoping for the students who come, that they discover things in themselves, things in the subjects that these teachers open up to them, some of the possibilities that might be there in their own futures in terms of their intellectual and creative, excuse me, development. I see that there's some questions in the chat, and I know my colleagues at Putney are going to want us to get to those. And one of them I want to answer right away. There's some questions about the subjects and so on, but there's a question about the difference between our program and Oxbridge academic programs. And I'll just say that, as Peter knows very well, I was the founder of Oxbridge academic programs back in 1985. Years ago, I merged that organization with World Strides, and I no longer have anything to do with it. And so I'll just mention, I think it still exists. I have nothing to do with it. And I would simply say that the difference between our program and any other summer program in Oxford is the quality of these teachers. I would put our faculty up against any collection of teachers in terms of their mastery of their subjects, their intellectual and academic qualifications, and particularly their passion and their skill as teachers in terms of opening those subjects up. I'd be happy to take an individual call from anybody who want to talk about particular teachers, but that's where I would draw the difference. It's the person at the front of the room in our program that makes all the difference.
And
Peter, did you want to jump in?
I'll just jump into what Jim just said. Is he left one really important equation out of that question, and it isn't just Oxbridge; it's any of the other programs at Oxford or offered in the summertime. They don't have Professor Jim Basker, and all I can tell you is the reason that this is such an exciting summer opportunity is rooted in what you've just seen in this webinar. As a governor, I met with all kinds of fascinating people from all over the globe. It's a great job. But I got to tell you, I sit in this webinar and I listen to Rodina and I listen to Mihaela and I listen to Jim and I go, oh my God, what I would do to be a high school student and be able to carry just the taste of the conversations that you get excited about in learning forward for a summer. Like, what a dream. Jim's quiet passion in life, he sometimes gets mad when I say this, I know it. It is to convince really high achieving students to go to Oxford or Cambridge because of his experience there. And his entire faculty shares with the students a level of learning and education that is very different from what we do here in the United States. So I would say, I think this is an unparalleled program for 3 reasons. Because of them, leadership matters. And Professor Basker is a perfectionist who demands perfection not only from his faculty, but from the deans and the entire staff who are looking after your loved ones during the summer in an educational journey that's unparalleled. Second, outside of these extraordinary seminars is a really vibrant community of really interesting students, diverse, very diverse crowd from an admissions perspective. I help with the admissions process. You'll have a football player who wants to, really expand on more than just football. You'll have musicians, you'll have artists, you'll have creative writers, you'll have folks that are just dying to be in medicine, law, but want to change the world. You'll have folks who are committed to climate change and environmental justice. It's all there in a very diverse group of students. But the fact is, outside of these seminars, there's a very vibrant community that is carefully orchestrated with 40 years of Jim's experience, 72 years of our experience. And I'd say the third is, so you have academic quality, you have quality of community, and I think the third one that really matters is just the folks that we are able to select to join these programs. And our students always say, I was with a group of students that I would dream to be able to be with forever. They build friendships and connections while they're expanding their academic horizons that I think are unparalleled for a summer experience. So it's life-changing, and we don't know the inner workings of other organizations. I can tell you why Oxford Academia is absolutely phenomenal.
Right, thank you. And there's one other really good question that someone asked that I thought maybe Jim or Rodina or someone might be able to answer, and it is, it's about the approach to instruction. So they're asking, how do you apply Oxford's discussion-based approach to a subject like engineering? So maybe Mihaela or Rodina might be able to answer that.
As an English professor, I feel highly qualified to answer that question, but I've been working with science teachers for a very, very long time. And to evoke Einstein, who said, imagination is more important than knowledge. And that's true at the root of science. The science teachers we have are not merely instrumentalists or mechanics who try to take people through equations and formulas and so on. Not at all. Nick Salmon, who's an engineering specialist and is doing the engineering course, is a guy with a broad range of scientific interests and knowledge, and he approaches it as a broad frontier of, what is this science going to be like in the future? So it's open to students with questions. How do you see this field, whether it is engineering or indeed medicine or other fields? How's it going to address the problems of the future? What are the experimental approaches now that may become practical in the future? What are the questions that remain to be answered? What are the priorities for science? And yes, indeed, I think Nick might put an equation or two up on the board. He's fully capable of doing that and teaching the kids how to decipher or replicate those. But that's not the fundamental approach to any of our science subjects. They're not about equations and problem solving. They are about ideas and concepts and their application in the world, especially the future.
Great, thank you, Jim. And there's one question, and I think is our last one, and Pete, I feel like you're going to want to jump up to answer this one. But it is, what is your admissions criteria? And maybe you can talk a little bit about the admissions process as well.
Sure, and probably Mihaela and Rodina and Jim can help me with this, because they get the quality of the other end of admissions, was being able to teach these amazing students. Listen, applying is easy. You go and you go to the Oxford Academia website, you hit apply now, and you fill out a form that takes you about 7 minutes, just basic information. You then make a $700 deposit on Visa or MasterCard. We then write back, and you have to list your major and minor choices. We then write back, admissions will write back and say, yes, we have room, hopefully. If they don't, we'll call you. If you don't have space, we'll call you and try to figure out where we can fit you in. And at that point, they will ask the student applying to furnish us with the email of 2 teachers that know them well at school, and they have to write an essay. It's not your college essay, but we're asking for 3 or 4 paragraphs that will really help us understand what you can give and what you want to get out of the program. We then take you to admissions. If we think that you're going to do well on the program and gain a lot from it, we'll accept you. If we don't choose you, we refund we credit your credit card the $700 and suggest that you wait a year or apply in another year. So it's a rolling admissions process. At this time, there's room in all 3 programs, but you don't have to wait around and wonder. And I should say, in the admissions process, when we acknowledge space, we don't give that space to someone who applies after you, but whose teachers might be more prompt. In other words, the only reason that we wouldn't select you is if you think we're not ready for you, if you're not ready for it or not appropriate for it. Now, what are we looking for? Jim can probably take that one, but very briefly, we're looking for high-achieving, curious students who can really get excited about hands-on learning. There are no exams, there are no tests. This is really an opportunity to learn about subjects because you're excited about them or you want to learn more about them. So it's for curious students. If you're struggling in school, this is not a program where you'll be happy. So, now you don't have to be an A student, but we do need, curious students who are really excited about learning. What would you add? As well as a student who can work well in a group and give a lot as well as take a lot from it. Jim, Mihaela, Rodina, what would you add to that?
I definitely want to jump in because it's been my joy to work with students like this for all these many years, including the last 2 summers. I would just add a couple of things. One is that when you look at the student body, The one demographic that stands out about our students is that the vast majority of them are the only one from their school in the program, which suggests to you that these are kids who are intellectually curious, who are driven by that motivation and not just to hang out with the crowd. They also have the courage or the experimental verve to go off and be in a group where they may not know a single other student, but they want to throw themselves into it. So the other thing is, if you can imagine trying to keep faculty like Rodina and Mihaela and Rhodes Scholars from Australia and China, they don't come back unless the students in their classrooms are really exciting to work with. And I can see them both smiling because they know exactly what I'm talking about. I think Mihaela has been teaching with me for at least 10 years. And I'm sure it's because those kids, or the kids she has every year, are some of the most interesting and innovative and passionate that you see. Is that fair, Mihaela?
That is fair. It's been 8 years. So since I've been studying at Oxford, yes, this is true. I would say that these students are special because they are curious, like I already said before, and they allow themselves to be transformed by this experience. They're open-minded enough to actually allow this, and it is transformative. I have to say, in these 8 years, I've had students go on to study architecture at Yale and Columbia. I have some students who are master students now. And from last year's course, I had 4 students that I wrote a recommendation letter for architecture school. So it is truly transformative, I would say, not just for my course. I know that for psychology and AI and for engineering, also there were students who said that this literally changed their life. It changed the course of their life, it changed their academic interests. So yes, this is what I would say.
I should mention that over the course of the fall, I've had at least 6 or 7 different students from last summer come to New York who were visiting Columbia University or visiting NYU, and I'd have a coffee with them. But they were kids interested in every field in the world. Some of them did, 1 or 2 did medicine, 1 or 2 did creative writing. You know, they were interested in every subject. And obviously interested in Columbia University. They're sort of academically ambitious, I think, in all the appropriate ways. So, I think the student body and the teachers make a unique chemistry in this program, and that's the joy of it.
Thank you all. Do you have more questions, or Becca, or did we cover the waterfront?
I think we're all set. Unless there are any other questions, just looking at my colleagues here. Nope, we're good. All right. So I think we're all set. Thank you everyone for joining. And again, there will be a recording of this presentation sent around tomorrow.
And big thank you to Professor Basker, to Rodina and Mihaela, and to all of you who joined us. If you have individual questions, just call us anytime, 802-387-5000, and we can answer your individual questions. But thank you so much for joining us, and happy holidays to everybody.
Hope to see you next summer.
Onward.
Bye, everybody.